This is Command Post, a series of discussions about military matters from Time and the Center for a New American Security.
Dr. Korb, I mean, the issue became immunity. The issue became, can the Iraqi parliament approve granting of immunity to the U.S. troops? Everybody knew, basically, that that was a non-starter. Weren't there other ways to get immunity for U.S. troops, short of having a vote by the Iraqi parliament? Couldn't we have worked some deal out if we really wanted to stay?
Well, again, you know, we establish a democracy. That's what happens in a parliamentary system, because let's say we were able to, you know, get a deal that they didn't approve. They could vote no confidence in the government. Remember, Maliki did not win the election, okay? He finished behind Alawi. He had to form a coalition. He does not have the support of the majority of that to let Americans stay without immunity. And remember, we've had some horrible incidents, not U.S. servicemen, it's mainly been these private contractors that have done these things. And this becomes, I think, very important for Iraqi sovereignty. It was more than just the Americans, it was, are we going to be in control of our own destiny from here on?
What do you think about that, Michael?
Well, you know, I got to agree with Larry that democracies are contrarian sort of entities. Just to make an analogy with a much more established democracy, in Japan, we spent 15 years trying to relocate one lousy airfield.
Right.
And it's frankly...
But we're still there.
Well, yeah, you're right. And the Japanese default has been to let the status quo continue. So that is a distinction. And so I really do think that at the end of the day, the Iraqis were only willing to offer these terms at this moment. Now, you can go back, and I'm not trying to do a blanket defense of all Obama Iraq policy. And I think some of his speeches have been a little bit off-key. The speech at the end of August 2010, when the president took great pride in the return of all combat troops, we still had 5 brigades there at the end. We just renamed them, slightly reconfigured them. And the president got away with a little bit of semantics because, frankly, his critics on the other side of the aisle were relieved that he was staying longer than he had originally promised, and they didn't want to call too much attention to the fact that he was essentially revising a campaign promise. So, you know, there are a couple other areas where I could criticize as well, including the way in which we tried to shepherd the Iraqis into this coalition government, which in a sense, coming out of the earlier elections, that's when the die was cast, that you were going to have this solderist element that was so influential. In 2011, though, on the specifics of how to stay, I'm just not sure there was as much room for maneuver as a lot of the domestic critics here are now alleging.
Mike, I'd like you to talk a little bit about what we could have gained by staying. You wish that we were staying, and Larry has pointed out that he disagrees. Can you talk about some of the benefits you see from a continued U.S. military presence in Iraq into 2012 and beyond?
There are previous cases in history where we stayed through tough going, and it was worth it in the end. And Korea would be a very good case in point, where there were, of course, non-democratic governments for many years. There were riots against the United States. There were a lot of things that we had to wrestle with, but we stuck it out, and now we have one of my favorite alliances that we have on the planet with the South Koreans now as a result. And I would have liked to see us try, maybe for a somewhat lower standard, with the Iraqis to keep a working alliance.
Which also faces a real military threat. I think it's
next door from Iran. And internally, I think I would point to, of course, the unsettled territorial issues between the Kurds, the Turkoman, and the Arabs up in the north, where there is still no agreement on where Kurdistan ends and the rest of Iraq begins. And you could say things are better now, and I think they are. I just don't know if they're better enough. And for the bargain price of, you know, 10 or 15,000 Americans staying on at 10 to 15 billion a year, 1/10 the cost we used to be bearing in Iraq, I think we could have done a lot to help calm that for 2 or 3 years. But alas, I'm not sure we had the choice.
So you see it as an insurance policy that we ended up not buying?
Yeah, I think that's one pretty good way to put it.
Well, I think if you take that point of view, you have to keep in mind that the conflicts and the problems that Mike talked about, as long as we're there, they won't move to solve them. And I think that's a key thing that people forget. Okay, you're not there. What are you guys going to do about Kurdistan? This is your problem. It's no longer our problem. There's a lot of things that they've been postponing because we were there. And I think 10 to 15,000, boy, that I don't even know if that would have been on the table. Maybe 3 to 5 you might have been able to do that. But 10 to 15 would be a pretty significant presence. It would have, in my view, got Iran to say, well, we can't trust these guys, so let's, you know, do what we have to get them out. And then I think Americans would have said, well, you know, what are we fighting for?